ultimate goal of the Urban Servant Leadership Unconference, we want to be able to bring together as many pieces of the puzzle as we can so that ultimately we put together a picture that helps us see and to understand what a valuable, sustainable community needs to look like.
I'm here because my personal life mission is to help others help themselves. It's the epitome of what servant leadership is all about.
So I wanted to come to the Unconference today so that I could discuss the Healthy Indiana Plan, which is a healthcare plan that's available to folks between the ages of 19 and 64 who have incomes at less than 138% of the federal poverty level.
My name is Anita Adams. I work with Indianapolis Healthy Star. We know that there are inequalities that are happening in our community, and we work to reduce those for families.
You have to be called to be a servant leader because you know that you are going to give and you may not get anything in return, and that's okay. An urban servant leader is called to do what we do.
You should really research it. If you were not here, I urge you, I cannot say this enough, that you need to come to the next conference.
Hello, and welcome to Community Conversations. I am your host, John Gurton, aka Pastor G. And today, we want to just let everybody know why we do these during Community Conversations. Our goal is to highlight urban servant leaders, or those who are working in the urban community as leaders, and their major impact on our community, and letting other folk know exactly what they're doing, exactly what they're up to in our community. Now, you can join the conversation on IGTV, you can join the conversation on Periscope, you can join the conversation on Vimeo on demand, you can also join the conversation and watch on Amazon Fire Stick TV. That's going to be coming up as soon as we get this puppy edited, as well as our podcast on all the major podcasting platforms. Right now, I'm looking at the chat right now. So if you are watching this right now and you want to join in on the conversation, you can always send something into the comments box because I'm looking at it right now. Let us know what's going on. The most important thing I want you to do, though, is I need you to share, and share again so that others can participate in today's conversation, because we got a lot of great stuff coming up. You just saw a commercial for the Urban Servant Leadership Unconference, and I do want to remind you that pre-registration is open. This year's Unconference is going to be virtual, so that means that we will have people who will be registering from all over the country. There is a limit, so we need you to get in there and register as soon as possible for the Urban Servant Leadership Unconference. It is August the 15th. We are so excited about what we're going to be doing this year because, especially in the climate that we're in right now, we need to be talking, y'all. We need to be communicating about what it is that we need to do as far as our way forward. Now, today, we've got some awesome people who are going to be on today, as you can see right there from the flyer for today. Again, we're talking about our way forward, navigating the new normal. Today, we got Edgar Areza, who is in the green room right now. He's sitting there smiling at me right now. He's ready to get on. He can't wait to get in. So we've got him. We also got Kai Freeman at noon. Now, our 11 o'clock, she is extremely busy, so we're trying to lock her down to get her situated so we can get her on. But we also have a special treat today, and this is important. We have some folk who are currently researching the bills that are going through our Congress and our Senate right now. They're researching the two bills because we want to educate you all on exactly what is going on in Washington, D.C. This is one of the reasons why we talk about we need to hold our elected officials accountable. All right, agitation is good, but agitation means nothing if we do not move towards legislation. We do not want to march and do all the stuff that we're doing right now, and then we end up with no results in the end. All right, and so that's why we want to educate you on what's going on, the gridlock that's happening in Washington, D.C. right now. We're going to educate you on that. So we have someone who is researching all that information. She's also researching information on making sure that everybody knows how to vote, how to register to vote, how to get out the vote come November if you are not in agreement with what your elected officials are doing. Now, let me get to it. In the studio, check him out. There he is in the studio on the screen right now is Edgar Areza. Edgar Areza is the president of Healing Ministries right here in Indianapolis, Indiana. Brother Edgar, how are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. Thank you, sir. How about yourself?
We are doing well. I thank you for taking some time out to hang out with us here on Community Conversations. And I really respect you, and I thank you for being on because you have a perspective. We talk a lot about black on blue situations where police officers are taking or being what we call judge and jury and taking out the lives of unarmed African Americans. But we don't just stop there. Nowadays, we're including people of color, but we don't always hear from those who share some of the challenges that, and you may not see them as challenges, but I would argue that you've got things on your mind as a person of color in this country, where you have a native land, but you are sojourning in America. And so I really respect the fact that you're on today, and I really respect the fact that you have your own story, and we'd like to hear more about that. So first of all, before we get to you being the president of Healing Ministries, let us understand a little bit more about who you are. Go right ahead.
Oh, well, my name is Edgar. I've lived in this country. I was basically raised here. I lived, the first time we came to this country, I was 9 months old, lived in Texas. After that, my mom decided to go back 2 years after, and we went back to Mexico, got my education in Mexico till the 5th grade, and came back to the United States when I was 11. I haven't left since then. So I lived in Wisconsin, and now I live in Indianapolis.
All right, so you're sort of a man of the world. Then you're not local. You're not just
I think now it's about to be 12 years.
You've been in Indianapolis 12 years. So with you being in Indianapolis for 12 years and you've been in some other places, what is your perspective on Indianapolis?
A pretty nice place. I mean, I got really not much to say about Indianapolis. I mean, I got I basically graduated high school from here, and that's pretty much it. I mean, I do ministry here, and it's way different than Wisconsin is because I lived in a small town in Wisconsin, and living here in Indianapolis, you see all the colors of the spectrum here, when it comes to people.
Gotcha.
So it's a different experience, yeah.
Gotcha. So what is? I mean, I know you've been away from Mexico for a long time, but I'm assuming you got family members in Mexico. That you still have some sort of connection. What is your perspective on the difference between living in a place like America and what your family experiences in Mexico?
Well, I mean, basically is poverty in Mexico. The poverty level, and also they don't have problems like they do here, like racism wise, but their problem is more like economic, levels of, I'm richer than you are. That's kind of what the narrative of Mexico is. But it's a little bit different than what we see here in the States.
Is there anything about your background and your upbringing that informs the way you see even evangelism and ministry and the work that you do? Is there anything about your background that influences, what you see today as you do your work?
Yeah, I mean, it could be a little bit, yeah.
What do you think? What do you think is the most influential thing in your life that has encouraged you to be as active as you are in the jails and hospitals, and in the work you do? What really motivates you the most to stay in the work that you're in right now?
Well, number one, I see the need of Hispanic people. Number one, ignorance is one of the biggest things, especially news and media don't help a lot sometimes because they expand things that sometimes are not really true and scares people, especially when reporting a crime, you see all these Hispanic news saying, oh, this person got deported for calling the police, and it might be true in that instance or in that case. But now you got Hispanic people being scared of speaking out or reporting any crime that they see or that they experience. And basically, that's where I come in, you know, as a volunteer chaplain. I try to help people out, not just in the spiritual or physical sense or psychological sense, but my area of help comes in every way I can help, or any way that I have, or anywhere I can exercise any knowledge that I have, I would actually help.
So in that regard, you know, have you seen an increased need for the services that you're providing, or an increased need for spiritual awareness, an increased need to educate your community over the past few years, especially since, I do want to talk a little bit about you being a DACA recipient. And like you mentioned, the media talks about deportation and all of that. Have you felt a need to do more? Has your workload sort of increased over the past few years as the news the news narrative has sort of changed towards the DACA recipient and some of the things that's coming out from the current administration? Has your workload increased?
Well, actually, the Hispanic community is pretty scared right now with the president that we have currently, Donald Trump. And yeah, in a sense, it kind of has. Because people's narratives are, I don't know how to say it, but they're pretty scared. They're pretty scared of what's happening right now, especially with the current president, and the media is not helping at all, I gotta say. But yeah, in a sense it has. I have people here asking me questions all the time and to clarify certain things. And like, I know a little bit about the law. I'm not a lawyer. But I know that we have rights, even if these people are illegal, because about 70-80% of the people that we deal with are illegal aliens. So I tell them, you know what, you do have rights. You don't have to answer questions. Sometimes, like there was this case where a police officer, ICE officer ICE agent came and knocked on the door. They told him, you have to open the door. If not, we're going to deport you. So these people were scared, so they opened the door, and they actually got deported. And
wow.
It happened in my mom's neighborhood. So I talked to my mom. I told my mom, if this case ever happens again, you give me a call and I can come right away, because these people have no right to come inside your house or to even threaten you like that.
Now, is it me or does the Hispanic community, do they understand how much the African American community understands what they're going through right now? Do they get the connection at all?
Some of them do, some of them don't. It's I haven't really spoken to people a lot since the pandemic going on. Like, our ministry has paused, so I really haven't had much time to talk to a lot of people about what's going on, especially with the marches, and stuff that's happening around this country. I haven't really had the time to talk to a lot of, especially Hispanic people that are immigrants. Most of the connections of people that I talk to currently, they're basically U.S. citizens. They're Mexican, but they're U.S. citizens born in this country.
Gotcha. Because and obviously, I think, as I said earlier, that the whole idea that our community is willing and understands that we are not the only community that is over-policed. We're not the only community that is targeted for, systemic, sort of over-policing. We're not the only community that is seemingly targeted for being marginalized. And in my view, it's in my view, and this is kind of why I'm talking to you, because I want to know I could be missing it. In my view, it is of benefit to the administration. It's of benefit to others to keep our communities from understanding one another or communicating with one another, to keep our communities separate and misunderstanding, even, if you will, each other. And to me, besides the language barrier in a lot of instances, it seems like there's a power in our communities communicating and understanding one another. Do you feel, again, I could be totally wrong, but the Bible says, how can two walk together lest they agree? And I think that one of the things that our communities are not doing is communicating and finding places where we can agree and saying, hey, y'all, we share some similar challenges right here, and we might want to come together and combine forces to go after these problems, as opposed to you doing what you're doing and you doing what you're doing and hoping at some point. Am I missing it, or do you feel a very similar sense of opportunity for our communities to come together and share common challenges?
I think there's definitely an opportunity. Also, I've been watching videos. I've seen how the Black Lives Matter movement actually, like, some of them actually embrace the Mexican flag, and that to a Mexican that means a lot. Mexicans are very patriotic, and anybody that embraces their flag is basically embracing their culture and a form of acceptance. So I see, what I've been seeing is that a lot of Hispanics are moving towards the Black Lives Matter movement just because of the simplest fact that they embrace the Mexican flag, and I'm not just talking about the flag as it's like a trophy, but for a Mexican to embrace the flag is like you're accepting their culture. You're actually fighting for the same, you're fighting for their rights as well. That's
Wow.
what I've been kind of seeing.
Wow. Yeah, and this is no different for us. Oftentimes we try to make sure that in these conversations, Native Americans are included in these conversations as well, because I don't think I need to say it. I think it's quite obvious that they are a people who were literally slaughtered in this country. Their descendants were slaughtered when they were just trying to be who they were in a land that for them was their native land. And so I think this is just me just chit-chatting. And again, I could be totally wrong, and I'm open to being wrong or being corrected, but I just feel as though many of us who have a culture and want to celebrate our culture, and no one, as you say, the Mexican culture, embracing that flag, embraces the culture. In America, African Americans have had to create a culture because our culture was stripped away from us as Native Africans. And so now that we have created a culture, just like the Mexican culture, just like Native culture, to have someone shame us for us being us, us trying to have something to celebrate in our own communities. Again, I think we share that as different cultures. We share the fact that we want to embrace and be proud of where we come from and our people and whatnot. And so I think that if we could come together, I think that would be more of a blessing. Now let's talk about what you do as the president of this organization. Talk to me about the organization in general. What is the organization and what do you all do?
Well, right now we're receiving training as of December. We were supposed to meet in March with an African ministry. So we're branching off an African ministry because they're training us on how to run a ministry. And especially the president of that ministry wants us to branch off their African ministry so we can be under their wing. So they can train us, and we would be working under their tax exempt. So we can be working under their tax exemption. But when, the coronavirus happened, it kind of paused everything.
Wow.
It paused everything.
Okay, so right now you all are preparing yourself, it sounds like, to sort of take work to the next level with this partnership that you all are working on. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. We're targeting jails, especially where younger kids are. Like the Bible says, we got to train up our children since they're young. So when they grow up, they will not leave the faith. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to target these places, correctional facilities that are being run, and actually, like, nothing's happening there. The kids come back and they come back worse. So it's like they're receiving some kind of training on, how to become worse. And I've seen it. Like, I've worked with these kids. They're sometimes jailed with people they have more experience than them, and they kind of see them as their what would I say, their leaders, and they become even with more experience how to do things even better. So that's where our main focus, we want to focus on. We also do health ministries, free health screenings. I'm a medical assistant. We do these health screenings for free for people that want them.
Now, you talk a lot about the solutions to many of our problems in our communities, and I'm assuming you also mean specifically with our young people start at home. So, in addition to the work that you do inside these facilities, what are you all doing with regard to the home life of these young people?
Well, how I do is we don't have a lot of people because basically how we work is the court system is not going to allow us to work with them directly because we're not certified. They're looking for some kind of a bachelor's degree, master's degree, which I don't possess. So what we do is we do what we can get our hands on, which is talk to the people that are already going to the courts and ask them, hey, if you guys ever need anything, we're here. Here's what we do. You know, and most of them are Hispanic because their mothers are basically crying. They don't know what to do. And the representation they're receiving when they're trying to fight for their cases is basically one lawyer for like 30 people. So, you know, one lawyer for 30 people, he's not going to be accurate enough, and he's not going to be very helpful when it comes to fighting for these kids.
Right. So now, to be clear, a lot of the policies and whatnot, guidelines that might prevent you from doing some of the work that you do are political. There may be some systemic structures. You just said it yourself. If I don't have these credentials, if I don't have this degree, if I don't have X, Y, and Z, then that prevents us from doing or making the level of impact that we want. So let's slide back because you talk also about the need for holding some of our elected officials accountable for the things that may or may not be going right or wrong in our community. So how do you see the work that you're doing being impacted by those who are in positions to make laws and set up guidelines and whatnot that could, like we say, prevent you from making the level of impact that you want to do? How do we deal with these people who are in these positions, making all these, again, guidelines and policies and laws? How do you suggest we deal with those?
I think we have to appeal to them. Basically, I have not much voice. I'm not a U.S. citizen. So I really don't have the power to go up to them. You know, they're not going to really accept my voice in a certain way because I'm not even a part, literally, I mean, not literally, but in a way I'm not part of this country the way they see it because I don't have the right to vote. I don't have the right to change the spectrum of the political spectrum because I have no vote.
Gotcha.
So for them, I guess, I suppose in a sense I don't count. But for me, it would be for everybody that is a citizen is able to vote is basically come and appeal to them. You know, Martin Luther King, the way he started with his church. You know, he started with the people that he mostly known and spread around like that. So I think we should like go up to our leaders, first of all, our church leaders, people that understand us, people that know us, and appeal to other communities and come together and talk to these elected officials and be like, you know what? In a sense, you're making the judicial system into a business because you are mass incarcerating people that some of them don't really need to be incarcerated. And after they go into these systems, they come even worse. They come out even worse. You know, so I guess my advice will be like, come up to them, appeal for them, stop voting for them, number one, because they're making it really hard. You know, like the services I provide my own money. I never go up to anybody, and you never see me asking anybody for money because God has blessed me with the little He's blessed me. I bring it back to our community, and I make sure that the best way I can help someone is by educating them. Education is the best way you can help someone.
Wow. Okay. So as we come to the conclusion of this, what I really hear and what I really like from what you're saying is that while you recognize that you are limited in terms of what you can do politically, that is not stopping you from being an advocate for those who can vote, for those who can speak. So it sounds to me like you're using your platform to still advocate for the rights of those who are in these juvenile detention centers, for those who are homeless, for those whose rights who have rights and yet they're still being suppressed. So this is what I like that I hear, and what I hope and my prayer is that those who are watching this right now, who you are a citizen, you can vote, you can register, you can get out. And here it is. We've got Edgar who can't and is still advocating, and we have people who can vote who are doing literally nothing with their vote, right? And so what I hear and what I like is that even in a system where you can't do what our ancestors fought, bled, died, were killed, were hung to do, which was vote, you're saying, I still can't do what your ancestors, your predecessors fought to do, but I'm going to still advocate for those so that those who can vote, those who can stand up, will stand up and exercise their right. Would you say that that's kind of where you are as an advocate for those who can vote?
That's exactly right. I mean, we can march, like you said, when we spoke a little bit before, the podcast, it's no purpose for you to march. There is no purpose for you to scream. If you're just going to keep doing the same mistakes, which is vote for the same people. It makes no difference. At the end of the day, you can scream, you can do whatever you want. It's not going to make a difference if you don't change the way you do things. So it first starts with ourselves. What can we do, to first change our families, and then that pretty much reflects on everything else you do. When we start with our own selves, what can I do? Voting. Stop voting for these people. That's it. Loud and clear. You stop voting for these people, you're not going to have these type of people in power.
Yeah.
And I think some of the political parties that we have, we're just basically one party away from communism. So we really have two choices. Mm-hmm. So, it's like choose Hitler, choose Stalin. At the end of the day, it's going to be almost the same outcome, because they're going to make false promises. They're going to feed you a sandwich, and you're going to be happy once you eat that sandwich. But what's going to happen after that next meal? Mm-hmm. And then people don't really think about that. They just think about the current. Let's think about the future. If I vote for this person, what's going to happen? What is he going to do? Let's look at his history. Mm-hmm. Look back to his history. What has he done for me to actually know? Not what he's saying currently.
Wow.
Because what he says, they're players. I mean, they're people that play other people.
Wow.
And they have the wisdom to do so, because that's why they go to college for it. Most of them are lawyers. Mm-hmm. Lawyers are taught not to tell the truth, but how to win. That's basically what a lawyer is. They're being taught how to win, not how to help. Mm-hmm. And that's how I see politics. Like I don't focus myself on politics as much as I do with personal problems. I focus more on one-on-one than a systemic. Because how can we change the system is approaching ourselves first. Mm-hmm. We start with ourselves, and then whatever we other people follow. Other people then will follow us, and that's how you change the system.
Mm-hmm. Wow. So in essence, you're saying, hey, before I go and challenge the broader context or the broader systemic issue, let me look at myself and see what it is that I can do for myself. What can I do? Which again, you are walking, living, breathing scripture, right? That's what you are. I mean, you're living out the Bible right in front of people, right? And again, that's what I like. So if you're not taking anything else from what my brother is saying, y'all need to take from this that this young man is saying, even though my rights, I don't have the same rights as everybody else. It sounds to me like he's spending his time educating the electorate, challenging people to register, and then I'm sure that you're going to get involved with the Get Out the Vote campaign as we get closer to November. We got early voting that's going to take place. As y'all know, we have an administration that's pushing back against mail-in voting right now. saying that mail-in voting is going to be corrupt. I'm telling you, this is just ridiculous. And so now we need people like Edgar out in the streets doing his part. That's what he's saying. He's saying, I can only do what I can do, but I'm going to maximize my opportunity to educate my community and advocate for the rights of my people so that we can get what we want. And if we don't have people in office that are giving us what we want, what I hear Brother Edgar saying is, let's educate ourselves and put other people into office and then hold them accountable. So Edgar, I want to thank you, bro, for taking this time and sharing with us today. Thank you for coming on, man. Really, I really appreciate that. Let me see
Thank you for the invite. I appreciate it.
Let me see if I can give you one of these. Yeah. We're going to give you some applause. Thank you for joining with us today. Again, I also want to thank from down there in Nashville, Tennessee, the First Lady Grace for joining with us. Rose Yazzie, thank you for joining with us. Sabay Jones Martin, thank you for commenting in the comment section. We're going to take a break, and then we're going to come back. We've got another interview coming up, but here's what I want y'all to do. Brother Edgar, I want you to jump on too and jump into this conversation online as we go live, because remember, what we have right now is we have someone who is researching 2 bills. And let me get this in front of me, Brother Edgar. Let me get this in front of me, because I want y'all to get this. I don't want anybody to miss this, all right? I want y'all to come back, because we're going to educate you on the 2 bills that are being sponsored both by the Democratic side and the Republican side of the Congress, of the House and Senate right now in Washington, D.C. I'm trying to get it up. Y'all give me a second. This is organic. What I'm doing right now is organic. So this is me just, hold on. This is organic. So this is me just doing what I feel like we got to do. We got to educate ourselves on what's going on. Y'all remember, even Edgar said it himself. It makes no sense whatsoever that we're going to march and scream and loot and holler and meet and all that stuff that we've been doing for the past, month, 3 weeks, month or so. It makes absolutely no sense to do that if nothing is going to change, right? We're doing this because we need to see change. All right, so here's the deal. We got someone who is researching the Justice Act, which is led by Republicans, and Justice in Policing Act that is led by Democrats. Y'all can go out and do a Google search on that right now if you want to, but we are going to tell everybody what those 2 acts include. They're both of them are very similar. All right, they just have some slight differences. Now, the Democratic version goes a little further in terms of making sure that we have some laws on the federal books against things like chokeholds, right? Against things like making sure that police can be held accountable. There's a word called immunity or something like that. Immunity, I can't think of the exact term, but some of y'all know what I'm talking about. So we're going to go into the Justice Act, the Justice and Policing Act. We're going to share with people in just a few minutes when we get Sister Faith McKinney on. We're going to talk about that so that you all are educated, right? That's what Edgar's been talking about. You got to be educated about what our community is demanding and asking for, so that when our politicians don't give us what we're asking for, we vote them out of office. We tell them, good riddance, all right? See you, wouldn't want to be you. If you're not going to do, with all the marching that's going on, if you're not going to change anything, then you got to go, right? If all this marching, y'all, millions of people in the street all over the world demanding justice, right? Okay? And then we got to have this conversation, Brother Edgar, we got to have this conversation about black on black and black on blue crime, because we've got folk who are distracted by the nomenclature black on black. Meaning that you're shutting down because somebody uses the phrase black on black. And all I gotta say is when my Mexican brother kills another Mexican brother, I got a problem with that. Just like I got a problem when a black person kills another black person. I got a problem when a white person kills a white person. But unfortunately, the numbers show that African Americans kill themselves 10% more than anybody else. So yes, I got a problem with that. You tell me what you want to call it. I don't care what you want to call it. I call it a problem. Okay? And in our communities, we're dealing with not only oppression from white people, we got oppression from white supremacists and skinheads and neo-Nazis. And I got a problem because I ain't got time to be scared of everybody. I ain't got time to be scared of my kids. I ain't got time to be scared of folk in my own community. I ain't got time to be scared of young people who are walking them down the street. I got enough problem being scared of these white folk who are systematically instituting racism that is oppressing my people and being afraid of my own community at the same time. So yes, when black people kill black people, I got a problem with that, especially when we protect them with snitches get stitches. We ain't got time for that, y'all. So yeah, we need to stop being distracted by words and to deal with the psychosis that our community is involved with right now, that all is a part of the system of racism and the fear tactics that Edgar talked about, the fear tactics, using the media as a fear tactic, using legislation as a fear tactic, using the bully pulpit as a scare tactic. We need to deal with that, and we need to talk about it. I am nice, brother Edgar. I don't always rant like this all the time. But I'm just saying, y'all, we need to be educated, and Edgar said that himself. We need to educate y'all. So again, brother Edgar, thank you. I'm about to go back to my music. Give us a break. We're going to take a break here, and then we're going to come back with some more. God bless you. If y'all got comments, I see you, Sister Tanya. God bless you for joining with us. I see y'all. We're going to be back in just a few minutes. Brother Edgar, thank you. We'll see y'all right back here in a few minutes. God bless. Peace. All right, everyone. All right, everyone. We are back. We are back. This is Pastor G. We are on Community Conversation, and as I said earlier today, we wanted to spend some time trying to educate each other in our community about what's going on in Washington, D.C. So I have one of our great supporters, board member of Unite for Change. She's on. There she is, Sister Faith. How you doing, Sister Faith?
I'm doing great, Pastor G. Thank you so much for allowing me to be a guest. This is wonderful.
and so Sister Faith is an integral part of Community Conversations. She is, sort of the backbone and sort of the background of what makes this show happen. So y'all do realize that just because y'all see me talking too much, as my wife says, and I know I talk too much, but at least I know that I talk too much. Nevertheless, it takes people behind the scenes and not just people like me out front talking all the time. And so Sister Faith is one of those individuals that without her, there would be no Community Conversations TV. All right. So let me just say that. So yay, Sister Faith. So thank y'all for her. If you are online right now, make sure you go into the chat box. I'm looking at it right now. Go into the chat if you have any questions. We're going to do the best we can to have an organic conversation about these two bills. And here's the deal. We have had the marches, Sister Faith. We have had the rallies on state houses all over the country. Several folk got arrested down there in Nashville, Tennessee. We found out during one of their rallies. We've had people literally die on the streets after George Floyd. We've had fires that have been set. We've got billions of dollars worth of infrastructure that is now needing to be rebuilt. We have cried. We have been disgusted. We have been appalled. We have been all those things. But now it is time for us to move from agitation, move from the streets to legislation. It's time for some laws to change. And so with that, I've asked you to help me help our community understand a little bit more about what's going on in DC. And I'm gonna be honest with you. We're not getting ready to sit here and act like we know everything. This is why we're having community conversations. We're gonna tell you what we don't know, what we don't understand. And hopefully, as y'all are sharing this video, you will share it with someone who will enter into the chat box some of the answers to the questions that we're posing today. Isn't that right, Sister Faith?
That's right. That's right. Yeah. This is not my lane, but because this is so important, I have to make it my lane. And I believe that everybody has to make it their lane. It's important for us to learn what's going on. So being as transparent as we can, and we'll just let you know that, we don't know everything, but we want to know what's going on, and we want to know how to help other people not have to experience what we're dealing with right now. So thank you, Pastor G, for having the foresight to do this, having a platform for this conversation to be held.
No problem. Now, here's the deal. If you've been watching the news, there is gridlock in DC. There is gridlock in Washington around what the legislation needs to look like coming out of George Floyd, all the marches surrounding George Floyd's death, as well as Ahmaud, as well as Breonna, as well as Reed, as well as all the others who have Eric Garner, you name it. And so let me name the two bills. And I'm looking at, just so y'all know, I'm looking at an email that's coming to me from State Representative Congresswoman Susan Brooks, who serves the 5th District here in Indiana. That's the district that I live in, Faith. The 5th District.
North Hamilton County, Carmel, Boone County, all those, yeah.
Now, from what I understand, she's not running for office again
Right.
And y'all make sure, again, if you're listening to this and you got answers, if you got answers to some of the stuff that we're talking about, please post it in the chat box. Share this conversation, because there's going to be somebody somewhere that's going to be asking or going to be saying, well, I want to vote, but I don't know what the issues are. Well, I want to, have it, but I don't know this, I don't know that. So y'all, this is community conversation. So we the community, let's talk. Susan Brooks serves the 5th district of Indiana, which is where I live, which is why I'm on the email list for her. If you have a state representative or congresswoman or whatever in your district, you should at least be on the email list, whether you agree or you vote or you agree or you're a part of that party affiliation or not, so you can understand what the heck is going on. So, but here's what I noticed, Faith. Here's what I noticed. In the email that she sent out, I would argue that her email is clearly slanted towards a Republican direction.
And that's because she's a Republican, and that's, the 5th district currently is a Republican district. Now, I'm not sure if Dee Thornton won the primary in the 5th district. Dee Thornton is was the leading Democratic candidate for Congress up in the 5th district. But so yeah, I don't know if she would be the person who would be running up against whomever is running for the 5th district in a Republican Party. But yeah, Dee is strong. And I live in the 7th district, which is Andre Carson, and I don't believe I got an email.
Really?
I don't know.
Really? That's interesting.
I know I'm on the mailing list. I don't think I got an email stating anything. So, one of the things that we really need to make sure is that we hold our Congress people accountable. We need to know what's going on. And if the 5th district, they're getting their information, I want to make sure I get my information here in the 7th district.
Right.
So wherever you are, find out who your Congress people are, because that's what's really holding up things. They're making things move. They're making things not move. If you're not happy with what's going on in Washington, are they part of it?
So I think it kind of starts there with what you just said. Somebody, I don't know if anybody else is watching this, if you're in the 7th district or not, but if you didn't get an email, I would love to be able to contrast an email from a Democrat to this email from a Republican. I would love that. Right? Now it looks like
I would too.
It looks like Christina Hale.
Oops, sorry.
That's okay. It looks like
Sorry.
Christina Hale. Or she's running.
She's running for the.
It looks like, I don't know, maybe she's the one that advanced in that race, but there are 5 people who are running in the general election come November the 3rd. That's Christina Hale, Victoria Sparks, I guess it is, Ken Tucker, Vernon Moore, and Ellen, I don't know, Kizik. Ellen Kizik.
Okay, so
that's who was listed.
So Dee Thornton didn't make it, but I believe Christina Hale is the Democratic candidate.
Correct.
Okay.
So nevertheless, let's go back to the point that I'm looking at an email from my elected official about the 2 bills that are floating in DC right now that are what I guess you could argue are stalled. The name of those 2 bills, so that you can write these down if you don't already have them. If you're joining this call and you're in the chat, what I'd ask you to do is, as I read these, type these into the chat box. The first one is called the Justice Act. It is just called the Justice Act. This one is the one that is Republican-led. Okay, the Justice Act is Republican-led. This is coming out of the Republican Party. Mm-hmm. All right, now the other one is called Justice in Policing Act. I mean, right there we start to see part of the challenge, that they're both very similar in the name. And so I can imagine that there's probably some citizens that are like, okay, which is it? Which is it? Justice Act, Justice and Policing Act? I'm confused. I could see that. All right, so do you have information up about the Justice and Policing Act? Faith?
I do.
Could you share with us a little bit about it?
So this bill, let's see, I just have the overview. It's the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act of 2020, and sponsored by Representative Bass and Karen Bass. So, gosh, hold on. Let's see. They don't make it easy to read these. So the bill addresses a wide range of policies, but this one, I'm just going to read this. The bill facilitates federal enforcement of constitutional violations, e.g. excessive use of force by state and local law enforcement, among other things. It does the following. It lowers the criminal intent standard from willful to knowing or reckless to convict a law enforcement officer for misconduct in a federal prosecution. That's big. It limits qualified immunity as a defense to liability in a private civil action against a law enforcement officer or state correctional officer, and authorizes the Department of Justice to issue subpoenas in investigations of police departments for a pattern or practice of discrimination. The bill also creates a national registry and the National Police Misconduct Registry to compile data on complaints and records of police misconduct. It establishes a framework or prohibit racial profiling at the federal, state, and local levels, and the bill establishes new requirements for law enforcement officers and agencies, including report data on use of force incidents to obtain training on implicit bias and racial profiling, and to wear body cameras. So I thought that IMPD had body cameras already.
No.
Because we had Chief Roach on, last year on Real People, Real Voices, talking about they were ordering the cameras, and that was one of the things that we were doing. When I learned that they didn't have them, I was furious.
Yeah. And that's something that the mayor Hogsett has had to address, because the city county council approved the money. Suppose they were coming, but this all came up with the Sean Reed incident, where there were no body cameras to prove or disprove what had happened. What happened in that situation. This came up again. So again, if you go to Unite for Change's webpage, you'll notice on the Unite for Change webpage that in the gaps and overlaps, that's one of the demands on many of those lists that are being advocated for by several community organizations, that we get those body cam. But then here's the other deal too. It's not just about body cams. It's also about having them on and also releasing the footage to the public, to the family, X, Y, and Z. So it's one thing to have the body cam, but it's another thing for them not to turn it on. And then it's another thing to have it on and to release the footage. Anybody notice that the George Floyd case has reinvigorated other cases throughout the country where body cam footage did exist, but it hasn't been released until now because of George Floyd, right? So it's not enough to have body cam if you're not going to turn it on or you're not going to release the footage, right?
That's right.
So.
That's right. So I wonder if we find that these police actions that have taken place where someone has died or had suffered bodily injury unnecessarily, will people be able to go back and file suit, which is something that they're talking about now.
Yeah,
it lowers the criminal intent standard.
And all I gotta say is, if somebody's watching this right now, you're on your computer, look this stuff up and let us know. Throw it in the chat, because this is the conversation that we need to be having. Because at the end of the day, I'm gonna hit the Republican version of their bill here in a minute, the police reform. I guess it's called the Police Reform Bill. My computer's moving slow, y'all. So the Justice Act, the Justice Act. Faith McKinney just talked about the justice in policing, but there's also the Justice Act. Justice in policing, sponsored by the Democratic side, the Justice Act sponsored by the Republican side. Let me hit some of these other things that you didn't mention, Faith. This again is the Democratic version, a Democratic bill, Justice in Policing Act of 2020. I'm going to read these again. And this is four things. It's four things. The basics, basically four things. And then I'm going to go down some of the highlights. The four things again are: the Justice in Policing Act would, number one, establish a national standard for the operation of police departments. Why is that important? That is important because you've got some elected officials that feel like there need not be any federal standard, that the standard needs to come from the state. So they're wanting to push the responsibility of identifying what the standard is from the federal level down to the state level. Well, we black people know that leaving it up to the states does not often benefit African Americans, right? Remember Alabama, right? Y'all remember back in the day where you could be black, you could vote in one state, you go across the line, you couldn't vote in another state, you had rights, you never know what you could do from state to state to state to state. What the Democrats are saying is that we need don't push this down to the state, because if you push it down to the state, depending on what state you in, you might get a different thing, right? That's what we dealt with the whole marijuana thing. Your border states might agree, yeah, we're going to legalize marijuana, but if your state doesn't legalize marijuana, what happens between state to state to state across the lines could totally change how you're dealt with depending on where you are and if you get stopped by the police. The second thing, mandate data collection on police encounters. Why is that important? That's important because there are people that have said that the guy who had his knee on the neck of George Floyd had prior incidents of complaints, and how is it that he is still on the force when so many people have complained about what he has done? So here's what could happen. People could complain about him. He could resign one force, move to another city, join another force, and that information doesn't travel. Okay? Right. So the data collection is important, and it must be shared, okay? That's number two. Number three, reprogram existing funds to invest in transformative community-based policing programs. Why is that important? That's important because when we have this conversation about defund the police, well, what does that really mean? What that really means is taking funds that would normally go to militarized police and putting those funds towards community programming that prevents the need for these incidents in the first place, right? And that's among other things, all right? Number four, streamline federal laws to prosecute excessive force and establish independent prosecutors for police investigations. Now, I don't know how I feel about that. Okay, and here's why. I'm not against streamlining federal law to prosecute excessive force. What I'm questioning, Sister Faith, and I want your opinion on this, is independent prosecutors for police investigations. Somehow, it seems like whenever we get into the prosecution of police officers, other law enforcement end up in that conversation. And it ends up being the police investigating the police. I don't know. Maybe it's me. Do you have an opinion about that?
Well, sure. I mean, if you're, it's always seems to be, one hand, what is, you scratch my back, I'll scratch your back.
Yeah.
If you let me have this case, then I'll give you something else. It's never separate. And I
think, and that also is what undermines community police trust and relationships.
That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're undermining police trust, and just as it is on a national, federal level, you're undermining the trust of everyone by firing the people who are supposed to be looking over or overseeing the legalities of what's going on. It's sort of like that on a local level. So you have to make sure that everybody, if you're independent, you're really
independent.
You're independent.
You're truly independent, right?
College buddies with somebody. Okay, you let me win this election, I'll let you do this.
Right.
There's so much things that are going on, and you know what? Here, Pastor G, here's what I think. I think that while we're distracted by a lot of things that are going on, not that Black Lives Matter is not important, not that the coronavirus is not important. I believe that the person in the White House is a big distraction for the engine that is something that powers that be that are putting in judges, putting in place things that will hold us down for a longer period of time, things that we are not paying attention to. They are adding judges left and right around the country that will fulfill their agenda. That's what I feel. If you feel something different, let me know.
No, I get it, but I want to go back to your prior point of the current administration and how the current administration, you're talking about, the judges that they're seating on benches all over the country, and they're slant politically. And I guess you could argue that it didn't really matter if it's a Democrat or Republican. You're going to put a judge on a bench, they would slant some things. But it looks as though there is an overt attempt to undermine the democracy that is supposed to be America. And here's part of the reason why I believe we're undermining it. Because when you look at the track record, you just follow kind of the arc of all the decisions that are being made out of this administration. Not just the judges, but let's look at everything. What's the guy Stone, Roger Stone, look at how messy that has become. There was a guy just this past week that went to testify and who said in his, looked like a recorded testimony, that there was pressure from the Justice Department for them to not even, apply blind justice to the Roger Stone case. What does that ultimately do? The pressure apparently was coming from the White House. And again, I'm not trying to have a Democratic Community Conversations TV program here. I'm just saying that the people that we have in office are undermining the very democracy that we're supposed to be fighting for. Now, you could argue that we could argue all day that if Clinton had been voted into office, that things would not be any better. Okay, that's your world. You can have that argument. But I don't want to talk about what could be. I want to talk about what is happening. And what is happening right now is that elected officials, the trust of the community to our elected officials is degrading. It is diminishing, right? And we have the power as the people. They don't have the power. We have it. And the only reason why we don't is if we either don't vote, or we don't hold people accountable, or we don't have conversations like this where we're breaking things down and sharing this information with the public to say, hey, y'all, we need to pay attention to what just happened. Right?
And what's really important, Pastor G, is that we understand and that we act not just on the general election that's coming up. We have to pay attention to what's going on in these smaller county elections, because all politics is local.
Right.
It starts locally. It doesn't start at the top. It's local. So we have to pay attention to even the judges when we have the elections of our small claims court. All of this matters. So many times I remember, Pastor G, there was a time where I needed to call the police. I've been married a couple times. I wonder what's passing. But one of the things is I was so afraid of what would happen to one of my exes that I didn't call. Because I didn't trust that, and I knew that once he had a record, it would never go away and it would affect him for the rest of his life. So I had to weigh then, well, do I call the police? Do I trust that the legal system, that he's going to be in this legal system for the rest of his life? Do I want that?
Yeah.
Is this that bad?
Yeah.
And so I chose not to for that incident. But, you know, it's come to there. And you just had a guest on, Edgar Areza, who said that, you know, Mexican people or Hispanic people don't necessarily call the police when they are robbed or violated in any way, because they don't want to become part of the legal system, and they may be deported or they may be harassed by ICE. So it's really deep for so many more communities, and I mean everywhere in the Black and brown communities.
So some of y'all noticed a comment from Ro Milton. She's saying, which is why we should be pushing the movement of the younger people being aware and engaged in the political process and local governance. And to your point, Ro, there is a reason why on Community Conversations we're trying to continually involve the voices of the millennial crowd and post-millennial crowd and the younger folk, because we need them to see each other involved in this conversation, right? Now, I would argue that chances are, because they see me and maybe because they see Faith, that they're probably like, oh, that's not for us. But just like Ro or Lady Graves or Tanya or Rose Yazzie or anybody, Sister Sabay Martin, anybody that's on the chat right now that are literally chatting with us, we need to be sharing this conversation with them as much as we need to be in this conversation. Now, I think that we may have to, you know, in some instances, force their hand. It's almost like giving somebody nasty medicine. It's like, I know you don't want to listen, and I know you don't want to be interviewed, and I know you don't want to watch this live stream, but at the end of the day, this is for everyone. Having this conversation, talking about the Justice and Policing Act, which is sponsored by the Democratic Party, and then we're going to get to the other one that's sponsored by the Republicans in a second. We got to have this conversation, okay? Because at the end of the day, the arc of justice that Martin Luther King talked about is in the young people's favor. I'm not going to be here forever. Faith, you're not going to be here forever. But my 21-year-old daughter is going to be here. My 13-year-old son, who's sitting right over there, he's sitting right over there helping us with this broadcast. He's going to be here. He can't vote right now, so we have to do what we got to do for our future generations. So I'm telling y'all, you know, for as hard as it is for y'all to share stuff, can I be real? My wife, I talk too much, and I'm sorry, but we got to go here. Y'all, we have to stop being so, complacent?
Complacent.
We have to stop being so ignorant, right? And we have to stop being so lackadaisical about important issues. And we have to say, look, if you don't want your son to have to face someone walking up to their car and basically, what's the word for it? Profiling them. Profiling them because
walking down the street.
Yeah, if you don't want that, then you got to stop going to the polls only during presidential elections. You got to go when it's time to vote for local elections, right? You if you don't want your son or your daughter or your husband or your wife, if you don't want to be thinking the way Faith had to think about her husband and saying, well, I don't know if I can call the police.
His husband, a couple husbands.
Not that one right now. Okay, so what I'm saying, Ro Milton, thank you for being in the conversation. What I'm saying is that there's someone who's watching this conversation who can share this conversation on WhatsApp. You can share this conversation in Instagram. You can share this conversation on Twitter, right? That's how these conversations end up in those spaces. That's all I'm saying, is that we have to go deeper and do a little more than we're currently doing. We're doing the best we can, but we need help. So let me hit these, and I want your opinion on these too. We're still talking about the Justice in Policing Act of 2020. I've mentioned those 4 things: establishing the national standards, mandate data collection, program existing funds to invest those into transformative community-based policing programs. And I got opinions about all that. Number 4, streamline federal law to prosecute excessive force and establish independent prosecutors for police investigation. I already shared with y'all, I kind of got my own opinion about what independent really looks like. And we have to, again, stay in the fight so that, what did you say? That independent stays what? Independent. Yeah. Independent needs to be independent. Yeah.
So here's the things, you know, we have a lot of fire, we have a lot of energy, we have a lot of momentum right now. The hard part is keeping it going. Stay vigilant to see what's going on, to read these bills that Pastor G and I had just read, to understand and have a dialogue about what's really going on, because I'm telling you, people are meeting behind our backs. They know what they're doing. They know what the end goal is. If not to line their own pockets, to make it easier for their families in the future. We have to understand that we have the power.
Right.
We have to be the ones who decide who's going to, or where our direction is going, and that means going to the polls. I think that if we really truly understood how much our vote matters and why they're trying to suppress our vote so hard, then we would be out in droves. Period. Our vote counts so much. It's really it's our only voice. So yeah.
And I don't really understand how easily we somehow forgot how important our vote is. You know, when you really think about what our ancestors, you know, our predecessors and whatnot, what they did to ensure that we could vote, it's astounding to me that we can, you know, 50, 60 years later could act as if we don't understand why, you know, white people actually said that they didn't want us to vote because they didn't want us to control their lives. That's what they were saying. Literally, that was what came out of the mouth of this white guy who probably would say, I'm not a racist. I just don't want black people controlling my life. That's what he said, right? So they've sought to suppress our votes for, you know, hundreds of years. And so you got to know that means that our vote is power. And here's the example I typically use. You know, I typically say it like this. Look, if you think that your vote don't count, then I don't ever want to hear you scream and holler at a basketball game or a football game on a last second shot. Don't you ever celebrate a last second 3-point shot that wins the game. Don't you ever scream and holler of a last second 3-point kick of a football game that wins. Don't you ever scream and holler. Why? Because your vote is no different than that last second shot. That one vote could make all the difference in the win.
I got a question. So what about the Electoral College?
Oh my God.
What about that? What's going on with that? Because in 2 elections, the Electoral College.
Yeah, the popular vote didn't win.
Yes.
Yeah, the popular vote didn't win.
Who are these Electoral College people? How do we get them out? Because really, if we don't know who they are, how do we really have the power? How is it?
I'm not the smartest person on that topic. What I do know is that I don't think that it's about who's in the Electoral College. I think it's about what makes up the numerical makeup of the Electoral College, right? It doesn't represent, as the popular vote does, the numbers of people who are voting for an individual. It's a different numerical makeup. And I think, and I've heard people say, man, I think his name is Reich, maybe Adam Reich or something like that. I don't know if I got his name right, but there's a guy who is a professor. I follow him like crazy, and he has videos where he explains things like the Electoral College, but he also explains what we have to do as an electorate to get rid of the Electoral College. And so I would say, and what I'm willing to do is to share some of those videos in the chat box for those who are watching. I'll share some of those videos so that you can watch and learn, because to me, I'm probably not by myself, Sister Faith, in the thought process that if we could rally politically behind agendas to transform our government the same way we did for George Floyd, for things like against the Electoral College, to really make change in that way. I know I'm not by myself. I know a lot of people are thinking that same way. Can we generate that same kind of energy around a system that is totally unfair, meaning that everybody thinks that the person who comes in first should be number one. But with the Electoral College, that's not true. You can come in first and still not win. And I don't think that makes sense to anybody.
It doesn't make sense. And really, that is, I think that might be one of the points where when people say, well, my vote doesn't count, that might be it. That Electoral College might be the one that says, well, yeah, your vote really doesn't count, because these people over here are going to decide whether everybody decides to go ahead and vote or not. We're going to decide for you because we think we know best, or we are getting paid by somebody to tell us who knows best. I don't know. But if the Electoral College were so powerful, and if they were part of an agenda, then, still, why are they trying so hard to suppress our vote?
Bottom line, because in the Electoral College, I think the way that thing actually works, and again, I'm not an expert. I'm telling y'all, I'm not an expert. Or I'm a graphic designer.
We get an Ashley Burns on here.
Yeah.
Ashley, what's the Electoral College?
Somebody call her up. But anyway, but I think what the Electoral College forces us to do is to really look at the map of the United States and to determine where we really need to get all the people to come out, to get out and vote, right? So, that may put more emphasis on our electorate in Florida, right? Not to suggest that your vote doesn't matter in Indiana, but you definitely may need Florida to swing an election, or you might need California to swing an election because they represent a certain number of votes, right? And so I think what the Electoral College really does is it doesn't necessarily diminish the value of voting. It just increases the need for certain states to represent well in their particular election, because there's a certain number of votes in that state that are needed to add up to, the votes that it takes. So it's not, I don't think we could say that the Electoral College makes someone's vote not valuable. What it does is it raises the stakes on other votes, because we still need everyone in Indiana to get out and vote. We still do. Yeah. So, and Roe throws into the conversation, people need to understand gerrymandering and the power of the local vote. And yes, and this is my whole point, that what often happens is that when people don't go vote, they neglect it's like you throw the baby out with the bathwater. And so you forget that your national, your national campaigns also do impact what happens locally, right? Referendums and other things that are on the ballot at the same time. So when you don't go to vote, we need all of them, because when you don't go, you affect everything when you don't vote, not just the national election.
So, Pastor G, if people should go to town halls. Now people are having the Zoom town halls, sort of like what we're doing now, so that you can see where your representative stands on issues.
Right.
You can talk to them. I've been to Republicans, I've been to Democrats, and the priority of Republicans in Johnson County is way different from the Republicans or any party here in Indianapolis. One of their priorities is getting monuments up. Mm-hmm. That was huge. Mm-hmm. They were raising monuments. That's a big deal.
Right.
But here we have so much, but we aren't present to hold our people, our representatives accountable
Right.
for everything. I mean, we had radio silence there for a while back in when George Floyd was murdered. We didn't know. I don't know who my I haven't heard from my people.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't heard from them.
Yeah.
Not in mail, not in email, not in a Facebook, nothing. So maybe
But
I need to plug in. Maybe I need to plug in more. Maybe it's not on them. It's on me.
and that's the point that I was getting ready to make. For those who are listening to this conversation, and Edgar mentioned it in his piece. He said, before I get to dealing with the broader systemic issues, I want to first look at myself and see what am I personally doing? How am I involved? What can I do? And I thought that his testimony was so powerful because on one hand, he doesn't have the right to vote, yet that doesn't stop him from engaging in the process and advocating for the rights of his people. And I'm saying the same thing to us. We have the right to vote, and yet many of us are not engaging. So I do think, at the end of the day, I'm like this. Look, and some of y'all have heard me talk about this. Some of y'all have heard me talk about this. I personally think that we are spending way too much time giving politicians and some community leaders the responsibility of doing for us what we need to do for ourselves. Mm-hmm. Right now, and again, right. I'm trying not to poo-poo on anybody here, because at the end of the day, I'm not saying that they should not have the responsibility. I am saying that they should have the responsibility, but I'm also saying that does not negate our responsibility to do what we need to do for ourselves. Right? There are things that I need to do in my community. Go ahead.
That goes to your point when you mentioned earlier, where we've become apathetic, complacent, lackadaisical about our rights.
Right.
And I know, back in the 60s, everybody was fired up. Then we got a few little things, we got a little, got trickled down upon, and we were complacent for a while.
Right.
And a whole generation, really.
Yeah.
And so now the younger generation, our children are coming up and saying, wait a minute, okay, this isn't right. But now they're having to relearn everything that went on before. So It's not just something that you can just pick up and change everything. There were processes and things set in place that we have to understand.
Right.
And so we have to learn that.
Right.
But yet we have to not be complacent. And I'm speaking to myself. I have to tune into those town halls. I have to tune into what's going on in my city, county council, and what's going on with our. We have the Indiana Black Caucus Legislative Committee. Tune into those things. See what they're talking about. What are our agendas, and are they being paid attention to?
Yeah. Now I'm gonna hit this Justice Act.
But it's worth it.
I agree with you totally. I'm going to hit this Justice Act because I got to get off and get Kai Freeman on here in a second. Okay. And I just hope that this conversation has been beneficial to somebody. The Justice Act, looks like they've got maybe four things on their list. Again, this is from the Republican side of things. The Justice Act says this is the most significant policing reform in 25 years. That's what they're saying. It strengthens de-escalation and duty to intervene, training methods and tactics. It promotes and develops best practices for policing tactics, employment processes, community transparency, and administration. Those are the top three, and that's where it stops. There's more information here, but I know that we don't have time to deal with it. And what I'll do is I'll try to copy this Congressman Pete Stauber, I think it is. He's from Minnesota's 8th District. He has sort of a breakdown of the Justice Act that is sponsored by the Republicans. But let me say this. Here is where I depart from this conversation. And again, this is not me trying to be one-sided or the other-sided, but as I'm listening to the community, Sister Faith, this is what I keep hearing, that people who are in these positions are missing out on the voice of the community. And here's why I have a problem with this. When I read about the Justice Act, it's actually called the Just and Unifying Solutions to Invigorate Communities Everywhere Act. That's what it actually stands for. All right.
It's like all Black lives, all lives matters, huh?
Well, it's not just that aspect. Here's where I'm struggling. That this act, this piece of legislation, it says that Pete Stauber is a former law enforcement officer of over 20 years. He announced the introduction of his police reform legislation titled the Just and Unifying Solutions to Invigorate Communities Everywhere Act. Okay? So the Justice Act came from a law enforcement officer. Now you feeling me? The Senate companion of the Justice Act was introduced yesterday by Senator Tim Scott. This is an African-American Republican from South Carolina. All right? Congressman Stauber spoke at the introduction press conference, which you can see it whatever, of the Justice Act. Congressman Stauber, who is a former police officer, said, as a former law enforcement officer, I was devastated. Why? I don't want to read the whole quote, but here's my point. This bill, or whatever you want to call it, was written not by the community in cahoots with law enforcement, but by a former law enforcement officer. And so when you hear those 3 points that I just made, they're very law enforcement centric. I don't know what else to say. Because what I'm arguing is, where is the voice of the community in this bill? I'm not saying that it's not there, but it certainly wasn't included in these three. The most significant police reform in 25 years. Strengthens de-escalation and duty to intervene, training methods and tactics of who? The police. This had nothing to do with the community. This is on them. Promotes and develops best practices for what? Police tactics. Employment processes of who? The police. Community transparency and administration. From whose perspective? The police. And then they stop. I'm just saying. I don't know, maybe it's me, but the Justice Act looks very police-centric and not community police-centric, and I'm focusing on community. Am I missing it, Faith?
No, I mean, when you read it, when you read that, and I understood, when you broke it down, I understood. Oh yeah, that is police-centric. They're not talking about, oh, let's help the community so that we can keep a grocery store because people aren't stealing food because that's what they need.
Right.
And then they're getting arrested for stealing food.
Right. So I'm just saying, we got to get off. We got to stop. I'm going to go to I know. So hopefully, and here, and from what I'm reading right now, these two bills, the Justice Act that I just read, that's sponsored by the Republicans, and the Justice and Policing Act, which is sponsored by the Democrats, right now there is gridlock, meaning there is no collaboration, there is no cooperation between the two sides. So there is a chance, Roe Milton, there is a chance that our legislators can leave Washington, D.C. without doing anything. That means after all of this marching, all of the looting, all of the lives that have been lost, all of the violence in the streets, all of the press conferences, and all that stuff has been done, there's a chance, unlike 1964, a chance that nothing will happen in D.C. Let that sink in. Y'all hear me?
It's a scary thought.
After all that has happened, there is a chance that nothing will come out of this in Washington. And what does that mean for our communities? That means that when you look at our demands, I got our demands, our progress page on our website, gaps and overlaps page, and I'm looking at the agenda items from the African American Coalition of Indianapolis, African Descendants of Slavery, Black Lives Black Lives Matter representing Deshaun Reed, that's ND10. Black Lives Matter regarding George Floyd. I'm looking at Campaign Zero, 8 Can't Wait. Y'all got to, I'm hearing the Economic Freedom Fighters of Indiana, Faith in Indiana, Indiana Black Legislative Caucus. I'm looking at all of these agenda items. Many of these agenda items hinge on the fact, can we not get federal legislation that impacts what's going on the street level to set a precedent across the country? There's a chance that with all the demands on this list, that we come out away with zero on the federal level. Nothing. Let that sink in. Now, what do we do about that? Are we going to just say, throw up our hands and say, oh, well? Or are we going to do something about it? That's the question that's on the table. Y'all hear me?
Yep. And I know Patty Crispin Anderson has some people who can probably speak to that. So we're going to get with her and get some of her information, her guests, people that she knows on this conversation, because I don't know everything.
Right.
This is not my lane. And I'm sure for most of the people out that are watching, it's not your lane either. But we have to make it our lane. We have to make this a priority and, not leave it for our children to do it on their own.
Yeah.
We have to support them with knowledge and with the understanding of what happened in the past. We know. So we have to be sure to support these babies out here on the street that are fighting and getting killed.
Yeah.
So, yeah, Pastor G, I'm with you. It's not a political thing. It's a voting thing. It's to share your voice, raise your voice.
Yeah. Yeah. It's exercising.
Thank you so much for having
exercising your fundamental right. It's a right that everyone has. And if you think that your vote don't count, think about not celebrating at the next 3-point shot that wins the game. Because in some instances, your vote is going to make all the difference in the world. That's why we got to get everybody registered and get you out to vote. All right. So I'm going to put a lot of these links inside the chat box. I'm going to pull away right now, and we're going to start a new stream for Kai Freeman. He done hit me up a couple times. He's ready to go. So y'all stick and stay close. Make sure that y'all on. This is a young man who's the president of the Black Student Union at Indiana University. He's got a lot of stuff going on. We need to support him. We also need to understand what he got going on. So he'll be up in just a few minutes. God bless y'all. We'll see you back in a few minutes. Peace. Thank you, Faith. Thank you.
Thank you.